We are live, and we're here with Paranoid American Thomas. Thomas. It's a matter.
It's fine. Yeah,
Thomas
I mean,
fine.
if I'm in trouble, it's Thomas, so it's usually Thomas.
Gotcha. Get full named, right? So tell us who you are and what you do.
I am the Paranoid American. I've been publishing comic books about conspiracy theories and occult research for well over 10 years now, since about 2012. I started that when I was a full-time digital animator at Disney, which was a job I got right after I was in the music industry, working and getting tracks placed on Adult Swim and Cartoon Network and MTV and VH1 and all that, which is something that I got into right after I left the military. So that's sort of my life in a nutshell. There's more to it, but those are sort of the beats.
Right, of course. So Disney, that's crazy. Every time I hear that you worked for Disney, it makes me laugh. But your gateway into this world, what was it? Like mine into the high strangeness type stuff was like Bigfoot. And then it all collapsed from there, right? It all came, everything from biblical to conspiracy theories. What was your entry into this world?
I would advise any little ones plug up their ears just very briefly. I'd say Santa Claus, man. When I found out that Santa Claus was a big scheme, and then I started wondering, man, are my parents in on this? My grandparents, my friends' parents, my teachers, every authority figure that I knew for the first, almost decade of my life, they were all in on it. And it shattered my little brain to realize how easy it was to fabricate this completely false reality that I didn't even question. So, I mean, that was probably the seed that got planted, although I didn't immediately start looking into Gulf of Tonkin as soon as I found out about Santa Claus, right? It wasn't like a direct connection there. But this was also like right around the time X-Files was getting really popular. There was what I refer to on my Occult Disney podcast, this ubiquitous sense of conspiracy. You put on Doug or Rugrats or Animaniacs or just any cartoon during the late 80s to early 90s, and they all had some kind of man in black whispering into a microphone in his ear in the background, and they never had to stop and say, oh, by the way, that character, he works for the government and there's a shadow guy. Like, you just kind of assumed, oh, that's a man in black. I know what those guys are, right? So right. I feel that he's really kind of grew into like being conspiracy theorist by default without even knowing it. And that paired with growing up in the absolute fever pitch of satanic panic. I'm kind of glad I got to live through that. There's modern versions of it, but the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s was something special. I remember having sheriffs come into our classrooms and give us flyers to bring home to our parents that literally said there were Satanist cults that were hiding in vans waiting to just kidnap us and do God knows what with us. And we had to create secret passwords and all sorts of like support systems. I mean, this is conspiracy theory lore, and it was not isolated to just the fringe right-wing, like John Birch Society families. This was everybody in town, in a small town in upstate New York, is being told Satanists are out to get your kids. So I would say all of those things combined, from Santa to Satan, that's kind of what got me into this weird mentality that I haven't been able to shake.
Yeah, I remember just, the ubiquitous white paneled van was, harmless until sudden it wasn't anymore, right? So I grew up then too, and I remember sitting there like 10 years old, just like, oh my God, they're coming to get me, and I can't do anything about it, just crazy. And
then you feel bad because when they don't get you, you wonder what's wrong with you.
Right. Well, why don't they want me?
What did Johnny Ghosh have that I don't have? I don't get it.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy. So conspiracy theories. What is your, like right now, what's your favorite rabbit hole to go down? I mean, I know you've got rabbit holes that you're set in, but like, what's like your pet project rabbit hole?
I jump around depending on what project I'm working at the time. So right now, Bigfoot's actually a big one. Actually, Yeah, right next to me, look, I got this unopened box of Harry and the Hendersons wax pack trading cards from the
Wow.
80s because I've been working on a comic book, which is at doesbigfootexist.com, and it's essentially a chick track. I don't know if you're familiar with the chick track format, but it's a little miniature comic book that's all about Bigfoot. It's about the different cultures, histories, religions that cite them. It talks about interdimensional Bigfoot, homeless Bigfoot, biblical Bigfoot, Mormon Bigfoot, like every single version of Bigfoot that
Yeah.
I've been able to come across, different countries, time periods, everything, all consolidated in this one little book. So that's one I've been going into deep. And another game and comic that I got coming out about the Satanic Panic. So I've been kind of going deep into Bigfoot and Satanism for this last 6 to 8 months. Prior to that, I worked on an Illuminati comic, so I got real deep into the Bavarian Illuminati. It jumps around. I had a comic about Stanley Kubrick directing the moon landings for CIA and NASA. So those are kind of like what are jumping around in my head most of the time.
Yeah. No, I love that you're able to use it like just a different medium to go down these rabbit holes, and because there's none. I think you're the only one, right? I mean,
I'm doing my best to be one of the only ones.
right.
Because this was in early 2000s, maybe right when like Zeitgeist and Loose Change were coming out, and Jordan Maxwell was still with us, and David Icke was on tour, and I just remember being fascinated by all the claims, but a lot of them kind of air toward this like fear and panic. And what are we going to do about this? And, striking back and wake up people. And I was kind of like, where's the Nicktoon version of all this stuff? Like, where's the Nicktoon Saturday morning cartoon version of the Franklin scandal? And it didn't exist because those two things kind of don't belong in the same world. But it was almost like my calling. I really felt that there needs to be a Saturday morning cartoon Satanic Panic crossover that just hasn't existed. Like, for example, one of the projects that I've been packing up today are trading cards that look like old Don Russ and Topps and Upper Deck from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, right.
But they got like Werner von Braun and Robert Anton Wilson and, like Bill Hicks and Alex Jones. So again, like it's this weird crossing of the nostalgia, which I fully acknowledge is just programming from corporations, Viacom and Disney and, fill in the blank.
Just gamifying everything.
Right, well, and I'm partial to my programming, and I'm not trying to like throw it out completely. I'm just saying, how can I mix my programming so that it talks to your programming? And I'm almost leveraging this thing that was planned. Like we've got chips in our brains, but how can we use them to have fun? Right? That's kind of been my goal, is how to blend all of these scary, creepy, sometimes things that make you want to take a shower just by learning about it, and then turning it into a fun game or sticker or comic book.
Oh, what's so cool is it makes it just that much more digestible, right? Whereas, and so many people approach this, like even my wife, she's like, I like literally putting her fingers in her ears, like I don't want to hear this, right? But if I handed her, a comic book, she'd be like, "What's?"
Right, or a children's book about
or whatever,
chemtrails,
right?
For example. Yeah, I got a really good one for you too. I don't know your wife or what her media consumption habits are, but I just did a show on my podcast with a good friend, Cheney from Project Cheney, and we broke down the occult. I say occult a lot, but basically like the dirt behind the Real Housewives. Talking about like the companies that they run and like weird scandals they're wrapped up in. And this, I mean, rightfully so, this is one of those things that a lot of people are like, yeah, my wife hates that I talk about conspiracy theories. She's just not into it. Man, you have her listen to a Real Housewives breakdown, and now all of a sudden she's in.
So there's this new show out called, oh my God, I didn't think I was going to be talking about any of this type of stuff, but it's like Grosse Point Gardeners Club or something. Like there's this, but it's along the lines of like Desperate Housewives, right? It's actually the creator, it's two of the writers from Desperate Housewives are the creators of this other thing, of this other show that like mixes in murder and, kind of like Desperate Housewives did. So I watched that episode. I know the Real Housewives. I know it's different, but it made me think of, oh my God, if I could get like this content put into something like this, how she would just absorb it. Because I'm like, oh my God, I can't watch this show. It's awful. But either way, Project Chaney, isn't she blonde?
Yeah.
Yeah. Funny. Yeah. Great stuff.
I think it was she was the first show that I was ever on, like way back when a couple of years ago when I first started. My first podcast appearance anywhere was on a show that she was running with a guy named Jonathan called Idiocalypse. So, and ever since we just clicked immediately. We're both Florida people, so we were just destined to be homies from the start.
Right. Are you from Florida or
kind of?
You live in Florida now?
I've lived in Florida for a majority of my life. I came originally from upstate New York, and I would argue that being from New York and then moving to Florida makes me more Floridian than a natural-born Floridian.
Probably. I live in upstate New York now.
Okay, so. I don't know. Yeah, I grew up in a place called Oneonta, which was
that's where my daughter goes to college.
Yeah, SUNY, yeah.
Yeah, one of my daughters is in school there. Not that I should put all that info out, but either way,
you
whatever.
Can edit this out. I mean, I loved growing up there. I had no idea what kind of town it was.
It's a spooky little town, man.
Yeah, man. Also, the female to male ratio in that town is like 80%, like 8 girls to 1 guy. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, I laugh because there's a yellow deli there.
Yes, man.
So,
dude, Yellow Deli, another great.
So you want to go down a rabbit hole, right?
No, the sandwiches at that place are so good. I am almost willing to join their cult if they give me the recipe for the sandwich.
I'm gonna move to Tennessee and join your Yellow Deli cult because unreal. The sandwiches
Judah,
are amazing.
I think that's the name of that cult is the Tribes of Judah.
Yeah, the 12. I think it's the 12 tribes. Yeah. But but those sandwiches are ridiculous. I mean, they're all over the country. I had no idea. My daughter, we went one day, and I was like looking at all the people working there, and they all had the flannel shirts on and the man buns, and I was like, something's not right here. And then I went to the bathroom and saw the like poster of the 12 tribes of Judah. And I was like, oh, this explains everything.
When you walk in, man, they've got a nice little select. They don't push it, right? They're there to make you a sandwich. But if you look around, they got pamphlets, and some of those pamphlets are pretty wild. The whole story was that they were a bunch of hippies that got sick of the hippie culture, kept the hippie aesthetic, kept the whole, like, we're going to live in a van and grow our own food, but went kind of conservative, new wave Christian. It's a wild history behind that Yellow Deli cult.
Yeah, so I live right outside New York, Syracuse. So I'm right above Syracuse. So crazy. And then when I worked for the Air Force, like I told you, we moved I was stationed, well, not stationed, but I worked at Tyndall Air Force Base. That was something fun. The Panhandle, oh my God. So yeah, Florida's something different.
I wanted to be stationed in Florida, but I got stuck between Biloxi and Fort Houston and Security Hill, which is in San Antonio, right outside Lackland.
Right. Man. So Heidi Love as well, and you do a show. Is that all the time, or is that you do a show with her?
Yeah, it's called Monthly Mormon Mondays, although we've been doing more than monthly. We've been doing it, sometimes we do it weekly, sometimes it's bi-weekly, at least one a month. And a lot of people ask me, what are you, Mormon? No, I'm not Mormon. I don't even know if I'm even like potentially Mormon, but I am fascinated with America and American culture and the fact that Mormonism is a very distinctly unique American religion that's fairly new. It's one of the newest religions on the planet. I find it endlessly fascinating. There's so many cool little threads to pull from that. It's full of occultism. It's full of conspiracy and warfare and cowboys and space conquest. Like, it's got everything.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, so I used to work at the VA that's in Canandaigua, and that's right by where it was founded. Allegedly the angel came down and talked to Joseph Smith, and I've been to the hill, and it's all just, wow. It's crazy. So that's a story I'll tell you offline because it just gets deep with my dad. whatnot. But either way, it's a good story. So I'll tell you another time. But we talk about the occult quite a bit, and I am like obsessed with the difference between, my thing lately is between like Luciferianism and like Molochians, or the like Moloch and the Luciferians, and the battle
Right.
between them. What do we call them? The Mollies and the Lucies?
Sounds like a fun party.
Yeah. Do you know anything about like going down that rabbit hole?
Yeah, I mean, I've got my own takes on it. I'm not like a published author on these specific topics, but like my understanding is that Moloch and these rituals, usually when you talk about Moloch, you're talking about people that were sacrificing children to gods out in public. It usually is associated with state religion. So it's almost the opposite of occult or esoteric. This was not hidden. This was, in fact, you were forced to do this. Even if you didn't want to worship Moloch, you're showing up with your newborn, on the second Tuesday of the month or whatever, because that's just what you have to do. So I find that one fascinating, and a lot of modern sympathists towards that, they're kind of like modern day pagans that are trying to retreat back to old times and worship these old gods. Whereas Luciferianism, to me, it's a much broader, they're both broad terms, but Luciferianism can be stretched to just mean people that are really into the Enlightenment movement. They're into like this Promethean age of, bringing down the sun and the light of the light bearer. So it's very distinct from straight up, say, Satanists, like the Church of Satan or
Right.
Temple of Satan. It depends on the crowd that you're talking to, but there's a lot of people that's like, Moloch, Satan, Lucifer, whatever. None of that's Jesus. You're going to hell no matter what you worship if it's one of those things. So what does it matter? To me, it matters a lot because it's a tale of our history, and like the Phoenician and the Canaanite culture and Minoans, like all of these things slowly morphed. And I guess my one big thread that I've been pulling at is this idea that it was Rome that stopped Moloch worship and Baal worship, essentially. And what they did, though, is that they absolutely destroyed Carthage, which was the last remaining bastion of Phoenician and Canaanite culture, and Babylonian, everything wrapped up in one. The
Right.
last big stronghold was basically Carthage, which is modern-day Tunisia at the northern tip of Africa. And Rome specifically said, like, we are going to wipe Carthage off the map. We're not going to leave records, sons, daughters, nothing. There will be nothing left of it. And they were ultimately successful because a lot of the records that we have about Carthage are by the victors. It's by Romans and the Greeks, and people are like, damn, they got kind of messed up out there. So that's what we have left of the remnants of the history. But I guess the thread that I've been pulling at is that Rome showed up, and they're just like, well, we're not going to get rid of everything you guys are doing. We're just going to make it so only the military is allowed to do this stuff. And, and this was like men only, essentially. And we're going to do it underground. We're going to do it in caves and caverns. We're not going to let the outside world see it. And outwardly, we're going to project that we're worshiping this God and we're following this set of morals. But really, at dark and after night and underground, we're doing this other thing. And I think that that's sort of the trend that's been going on ever since. So now in 2025, someone brings up Skull and Bones or Illuminati or Bohemian Grove or something. All this is, in my mind, is an extension of Rome suppressing what people were doing in the public and making it so only the elites do it in private. And they've been doing that for over 2,000 years now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for sure. How was working at Disney?
It was kind of a dream come true for a lot of it, man. I mean, once I was there long enough, I realized that everybody was getting underpaid because of the privilege of having this on your resume and having the prestige of working at this name where you could just say it in a room and everyone's like, what? You work at... That part was really cool. Yeah. I'm not going to lie about that. But they knew that that was a selling point. So in terms of just doing the exact same job for a much more boring, company, I could go and work for like Booz Allen or something, doing roughly the same stuff, just without Goofy and Mickey, it would be, you know, whatever, like a little animated missile or a rocket or something.
Right.
But man, the 10 plus years I was there, the coolest part was that for majority of that I worked on property backstage, what's now Hollywood Studios. When I started, it was like MGM Studios, I think. And we could be in a boring meeting that lets out after like 2 hours, and I could just walk out the back door, walk on over to a rock and roller coaster, ride that thing like 2 or 3 times, and then go back to my desk and get back to work. And this was a normal occurrence. No one would say anything about it because everyone kind of did that. We had a movie theater in the building that I worked in. We
Talk
had
about blowing off steam.
celebrities coming in. Like I got to meet like all sorts of actors and people that were because we had an ADR studio, which was this automated dialogue replacement where they record a movie and then months later they're like, oh crap, we needed this person to say this in this scene. So they would have them come in and re-record stuff. So I mean, it was awesome. It was such a cool experience and very little supervision because there was me and 3 or 4 other people that worked in this little animation department. And we got to kind of decide what tools we wanted to use and how we had to do it. Of course, when it came time to turning stuff in, that's when Disney kind of sucks because it goes through this huge chain of approvals where like 12 suits have to analyze everything you're doing, and they would be like, oh well, I brought this home and my 9-year-old niece thinks that button there should be purple. There was a lot of that kind of stuff, but I mean, I'm not going to complain too much about it because for a large portion of it, it was a lot of fun working there.
Yeah, that rock and roller coaster is a definite plus.
It's getting phased out, I think, this year.
It's such a good roller coaster, man.
In the next 3 or 4 months, I think they're replacing it.
That's crazy. So do you still go to Disney?
Oh man, I haven't been there in like 5 or 6 years. It was
just
because I could just go whenever I want for free, right? I didn't have to pay for anything. And now it's like, oh, maybe we should go to Disney. And it's like, oh, it's $150 before you even step a foot in the park.
Yeah,
so
it's
usually
crazy.
It's like, maybe I'll just watch a movie.
Yeah. So the Occult Disney part of your podcast. So you go, I mean, you have a literal peek behind the curtain to an extent, right? But what prompted that to come about? Like did somebody approach you? Because I know you have a co-host. Did they approach you and you just jumped on it? And, yeah, I mean, obviously
it
you
started,
working. Yeah.
The short version of it is that I've got a good friend, Mystic Mark, who helps people get on to Tinfoil Hat with Sam Tripoli. And they had someone that was going to do an Occult Disney, and whatever reason it fell through or they weren't able to make it. And he knew that I had worked at Disney and asked me, hey, would you want to jump on Tinfoil Hat in like 2 days from now and talk about Occult Disney stuff? And I mean, I was interested in occult and I had worked at Disney, but I had never really done a full-on deep dive of Disney occult stuff specifically. So I spent, the next couple days just putting together notes and personal anecdotes and experiences. And Matt Comegys, my co-host on Occult Disney, he heard that episode and reached out and was like, hey man, I think that there's potential to just go through. And basically what he pitched was, let's watch every single Disney animated movie ever produced and break everyone down. And it wasn't necessarily like, let's do them all right from the go. Right. It was like, hey, I like what you did. Let's just break down Fantasia and Pinocchio and Snow White and all of the classics. And I had such a great time doing those that we eventually were just like, let's just do every Disney movie in chronological order. So we've been doing that for 2 years or so, and I think we're up to like almost to episode 100.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Your co-host there, somebody brought up a good point. I can't remember exactly who it was, about the difference in the folks that were animating then, like back in the original movies, right? Like Snow White and Bambi and Pinocchio, and the way that it is now. Like it was a totally different, like these were folks that had like been to war, stuff like that. I mean, we get a little bit of that now, but I don't know how many of those folks work at Disney now.
Specifically, there were people that were working on feature-length Disney animations. Then they get called off to war. They go and they kill people in war. Like, they see combat. They weren't just flyboys, like,
right.
CIA guys. Then they come back, presumably shell-shocked and PTSD and all the things. but then get right back to work making Disney animated movies and
For kids.
for kids. And there really hasn't been the same class of people that have put through the same exact thing. I mean, yeah, there's veterans, but there's not a lot of vets that started at Disney, then got called off to, Afghanistan, and then go right back to Disney and finish up the movie that they were working on before they left. It's unheard of now for that to work. And this also comes up as one of the explanations of why is Disney so sexual? Why are they drawing all these, voluptuous Disney princesses for, like, dude, when they weren't drawing cartoons for Walt Disney, there was not a lot of other people like, we really need you to draw this all ages content for us. A lot of it's like, draw us a pinup girl to put on the front of a fighter plane or something, right?
Yeah.
So it was either you're drawing Disney or you're drawing really sexy pinups, and they would jump between those two. So of course you get bleed over.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. I actually know, I gave Mark and I did an interview, Mystic Mark, and we talked about New Haven, which is where I grew up. So that was a real easy conversation. And we talked about Skull and Bones, and it's a good upcoming episode. It's pretty crazy. So some of the occult symbolism or like in Disney, like, can you take me through some of that? Like,
yeah, I've got some pretty heavy hitter versions.
Like from the beginning, or what, wherever you want to start.
I would start with, it's not the first Disney feature-length animated movie, but I would start at Fantasia, because I've got this theory that I've been developing with my co-host Matt on Occult Disney, but that Fantasia was an actual magical spell. It shows Mickey as the sorcerer's apprentice. He steals the magic from the apprentice, which is Yesid, which is just the word Disney spelled backwards. And they set up a whole bunch of archetypes that we're going to see for the next century combined. That Fantasia is actually creating a Disney universe that is so real that it now is a global conglomerate egregore. It's going to outlive me and you and your grandkids and their grandkids. Disney is a very real force in the world now. And the concept that Fantasia is the thing that created Disney in the way that we know it today is kind of like a fascinating topic for me. And there's a lot of specifics. So, for example, they draw a lot on, like, Goth, like a lot of these Germanic Grimm fairy tale stuff. That's not a secret. Disney basically used lots of Grimm fairy tale stuff. But in Fantasia, almost specifically, they have this archetype of the Black God, or Chernobog, which is a Slavic entity that kind of represents, the devil might be an oversimplification, but let's just say the devil, right? These two huge horns. I don't know if you remember this particular scene in Fantasia.
It's a wild movie.
It's a wild movie. It's not something that, if it came out in 2025, it's like, bring your kids to see it. It's a little bit for everybody and nobody at the same time. But if you look at the silhouette of Chernobog with those two horns and the specific way that they twist on top of his head, you see that same exact silhouette is applied to nearly every Disney villain for the next 100 years. The most obvious example would be Maleficent, the evil, like, stepmother. She also has this hat that she wears, or like her hair that she wears in very similar silhouette. And it's just one of these examples where Disney and Fantasia unleashes all these ideas that you keep seeing recurring. Another really good one is that in the Disney universe, whenever someone learns magic for the first time, whenever there's a sorcerer's apprentice, the first thing they do, without fail, is they use it to clean. In Mickey and Sorcerer's Apprentice, he gets a whole bunch of brooms to clean up the little dungeon that he's operating in. In Sword in the Stone, they use it to clean up the dishes. Again, in so many other movies, the second somebody figures out how to use magic, they clean stuff up. I think even in WALL-E, there's an example of this where, like, the magic of, the human spirit basically embodies this robotic entity and uses it to clean things up. So the first time anyone learns real magic in this world, they only know how to apply it to, like, the most mundane of chores. They do it to kind of do the things that they don't want to do. They just put it on this little autopilot. That's one recurring theme. There's another really good one that we've called the Disney proxy, and I don't think we came up with this. I'm sure I heard it somewhere else. But man, we have seen it in action over and over again. And the Disney proxy is essentially that in most Disney movies, you've got an underage character, you've got some kind of a child that has an authority figure. It might be a parent, it might be a guardian, it could be anything. But usually in the first few minutes of every Disney movie, they sever that connection between the child and their parental figure. And now the kid is by themselves. Either the parent died, the kid got lost, the kid got kidnapped. Something happens where the kid no longer has someone to look up to. And then the first thing that happens after that is Disney will plop in this intellectual character, some kind of intellectual property that they've got on t-shirts and lunch boxes and, you know, little Happy Meal toys. And this becomes the new stand-in for the authority figure. This is the proxy. And the reason behind this is because you put your kid down to watch, hey, watch this movie. I've got something I got to take care of. Bam, you've got a babysitter for the next hour and a half, 2 hours. But what happens is they kill their parents, and the kid's engrossed in the movie, and they're still learning how the world works. They're still figuring out the difference between reality and fantasy. So when you're engrossed in this movie and you're 5 and you're just watching this as the babysitter, like, they just killed your mom. You just got kidnapped. You no longer know where your parents are. You look around and, like, yeah, mom and dad aren't there. They're in the other room. So you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm all alone in this big bad world by myself. And then Thumper comes up, and Thumper's like, I'm going to help you. We're friends now. I'll make sure that you're okay. So naturally, the next time you're at Kmart or Walmart or McDonald's and you see that Thumper, it's like, that's the person that saved me. When mom and dad died, when mom and dad weren't around to protect me from getting kidnapped, that's the person that saved me. So I want that. I want that on my shirt. I want that in my toy chest. I want that on my Happy Meal, whatever it is. And I feel that Disney figured out how to turn this into a formula. So now it's almost like clockwork, and they play with it. They play, like, for example, in Nemo, they have like a mass child sacrifice at the beginning. They show all of the other eggs that got taken, except for this one damaged egg that becomes Nemo with his weird little flipper. That is a very high-level version of this, but really, hundreds of his brothers and sisters were just annihilated overnight. And then he gets lost into the entire ocean by himself. This is kind of Disney proxy on steroids.
Seriously.
Those are some running themes. And then I'll give you one other really specific one from the very first fully animated motion picture, which was Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, which is entirely Rosicrucian theology, I guess you could call, philosophy. And this is a recurring theme, too, this Rosicrucian aspect. Pinocchio is the same thing. Even the movie Wish, that's kind of new. But in Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, the good example of this is that Snow White represents the human spirit. She represents this Promethean consciousness, this new, like, weird quantum leap of just humankind. And she interacts with these earth elementals, these seven dwarves that go into the ground, and they dig up these rare gems and minerals, and they bring them back up. And what they do is they trade them. They trade, here's these rare earth minerals that we got in these diamonds and gems that we got underground. Here, we're giving it to you in exchange for you to teach us about human intellect and enlightenment and this spark. Which is, again, it's a very recurring theme. You see it in Wizard of Oz, especially in Return to Oz, which was all like Thelema, I believe. This was very deep into occultism. And then you start looking into the people that wrote the original stories that Disney adapts into movies, and they're all pretty much Rosicrucian, Thelema, OTO, like they're all very deep into occultism. This isn't stretching and connecting unrelated things and like, oh, that's kind of like this. It's like, no, the person that wrote that, the writer of the Jungle Book, Rudyard Kipling, like all these guys were hardcore occultists. And if they're not an occultist, you can bet money that they were in either US or British intelligence. So what a weird trend to start seeing. Man, every single source material either came from intelligence or some sort of an occult secret society. And I would argue they're kind of one and the same. They sort of operate under the same pretenses, and in fact, the early intelligence agencies would recruit directly from these secret societies because, hey, these guys know how to keep a secret.
Right, for sure. I mean, yeah, whether it's Skull and Bones or whatever, right? One of the Yeah, that's crazy with the Snow White. That's great. And I
Another
love that.
There's some creepy ones too. For example, Beauty and the Beast is one of the creepiest of all the stories. And that's because the origin of Beauty and the Beast was, how do you explain to your 14-year-old daughter that you just married her off to some 40-year-old dude that lives out in the woods and he doesn't shave or shower? He's literally a big, stinky, smelly beast, right? And they would you're telling your 14-year-old daughter, like, sorry, you're going to go and live with this guy, but if you're really nice to him and if you dance and you sing and you clean up after him, then maybe there's a prince deep down buried under that rough exterior. And, you know, Disney neuters stuff so that they can sell you the Barbie and your parents don't feel weird about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you look behind the real original stories and why did these stories even exist? A lot of them were their Grimm's fairy tales and sort of like Aesop fable in a way. They all had a reason why you're telling it to children. And a lot of time it's like, stay away from strangers. That's the number one rule
right.
that they're usually telling you. But yeah, Disney has this weird way of like, maybe the stranger's not so bad. Maybe your 14-year-old daughter shacking up with a 40-year-old guy. Maybe something good will come of that.
Oh man. What do you think of the, like right now, the alleged release of the Epstein files?
I think that the amount of political capital, which is in my mind is worth more than financial capital. If you've got political capital, it's resistant to inflation, it's resistant to the fluctuations in the market. So somebody is sitting on a treasure trove of political capital by having these black books, and it doesn't make sense in my monkey brain to just be like, all right, here it is, here's all of this political capital that's condensed into like almost gold bullion. Here, I'm just gonna give it to everyone for free. That's just not how the world has ever worked in my experience. So usually what happens is they'll throw a little tidbits out there, but those tidbits are kind of like the free samplers you get at Sam's Club, right? You're not going to get full on that. That's not your meal, but you get a little sample and you're like, "Oh, maybe I'll buy the bag of that. Where's that at? How much is that?" And I kind of feel that that's sort of what the quote unquote release of the Epstein files are.
The phases.
They're auctioning it out on the open market. They're basically saying, "Hey, this political capital is now for sale. Contact me with your bids." And meanwhile, everyone's like, when are they going to drop the names? When are they going to... Dude, they're not dropping the names like that because it would just be like burning money for no good reason. What, for altruism, for morality? That's never happened in my life where we've had a government that's like, we're just going to do this because it's the right thing.
Right. I had heard a really good example of basically, you don't get billion-dollar industries, billion-dollar, like with human trafficking or sex trafficking. You don't get entities making billions of dollars because it's just dealing with like you or I, right? Or like the sale of like drugs on the street. There's, like you just said, there's huge entities, like big political monsters with money that are compromised here, and either way they're not just going to give that up. I don't see how that's why it's been hidden for how many years now already. So,
and there's a very real trend that you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to see. Like, Weinstein gets taken down and it ends the Me Too movement. It's like, all right, we're done here, let's wrap everything up, everyone pack up, don't leave anything behind. We got him. We got the one guy that was doing it all, and we never have to worry about that problem again. Something very similar with Epstein, where it's like, all right, we got him. No more of this political blackmail, underage trafficking going on. We got the one guy and the one girl that was in charge of it, and no one else is going to fill in that gap. Diddy comes out. Oh, we got now the rap industry's clean. There's no more weird sex stuff going on in the rap world. Thank God we got him. And for anyone that was still holding on, like, no, we haven't got him, those are just scapegoats. Then Tim Ballard comes out with his movie, what is it, Sound of Freedom.
Yeah.
And now for any of the stragglers, they go and see the movie and they're like, okay, now I feel good. And we got Tim Ballard and we got Jesus taking down these traffickers. Now I can worry about the next thing that was on my list of things to be outraged over. It feels like they're just going to keep giving us these little breadcrumbs until we're kind of satiated and it's no longer a big deal. And we go back to claiming that that's all a conspiracy theory. Because, I mean, if you listen to Alex Jones in the late 90s, early 2000s, the dude was talking about Lolita Express on every other episode, but this was just standard fare conspiracy. It was like, yeah, FEMA coffins and Bigfoot and Jeffrey Epstein. What else you got? And then it comes out and everyone acts like, oh, no, yeah, we knew about that. Oh, no, that's not surprising. Yeah, we already knew about that. Like, where were you the last 10 years when everyone was kind of rolling their eyes like more of this unsubstantiated crap?
Right. God. Circling back, how does that fit in with Disney? Like as an entity, is there, because there's stories about like, you know, like the island at Disney and just, you know, just these things like that. And like, how is that, because it's so child centric, you would expect it to just be full of folks trying to take advantage of this. I don't know if you know any.
Well, the specific claim that I've heard was that Disney Cruise Lines, Disney has their own island in that same area. Right. And that there were, when you go on a cruise to these places, they have these excursions, which is like, all right, you paid for the cruise, but now if you want to go and do cool stuff while you're on that cruise, now you got to pay a little bit more money. So one of those excursions would be go and swim with the turtles or go snorkeling off the coast of some whatever. Right. And one of those excursions did bring people to Little St. James, which was the island that Epstein was running. Now, I don't think the excursion was like, and go into the temple and hang out with Jeffy and his friends. Like, it wasn't like that. It was probably more like you actually went snorkeling. But it does mean, like, it would surprise me if Disney did not do their due diligence and be like, hey, who owns that island? What kind of stuff's going on in that island just to make sure it's safe? And they're probably like, oh, there's an intelligence operation going on in here, so maybe it is safe. Maybe we can kind of go. And I would say the other insidious part of this is the Disney's entire sort of game plan, which is infantilism, is to make everyone just trapped in being a Disney adult forever. And again, I would bring up like that whole Beauty and the Beast archetype. Like, yeah, there's a scary guy that lives on an island in this weird Minoan temple that they're probably doing sacrifices, or maybe he's a prince. You know what I mean? Like that line of thinking exists in a lot of people's heads because of Disney. So that's about as far as the specific Epstein-Disney connection goes, is that they were island buddies. But I don't know if they were necessarily pimping out kids from their cruises directly onto the island. But they were close enough to, someone probably looked into it and was like, hey, guy that runs DCL, the Disney Cruise Line, maybe we look into this. And he's like, oh, no, we've already looked into that. Don't worry about it. Don't ever bring this up again.
Yeah, because that little temple that's on that island, man, it shockingly looks like something out of a Disney movie. So the blue and white and gold and So with all your research kind of circling back to the beginning, and you were talking about your Bigfoot. What did you call it again? It was
DoesBigfootExist.com is where this comic's going to get launched.
And what are your thoughts, man? Like, what are your theories? Like, after you obviously can be as open as you want, but, you know, do you have anything that you, like, lean towards on, like, is Bigfoot out there? Is it real? What is it?
I think by default, I'm a skeptic. Ever since Santa Claus, I'm a skeptic on everything. Like, you, if you're going to make the claim, you now have to back it up before I give it a whole lot of credit. So Bigfoot I've got an affinity to because of Harry and the Hendersons and because it was sort of this cultural thing in the 80s and 90s that Bigfoot was just a character that was out there. And I guess over the years, it's like, it's fun to think and believe in Bigfoot, but maybe he's not really out there. Maybe it never really existed. Although I'm not an outdoorsman at all anymore, especially in Florida. It kind of sucks. Like, even if you want to be an outdoorsman in Florida, you're just kind of like
hot
a beach
bugs.
bum. Yeah. But I know a large number of true outdoorsmen, people that hunt for a living. One of the Gary Lewis that has Gary Lewis Outdoors, he like hunts and travels the world hunting as a profession. Him and a handful of other people that I truly trust. Like I would literally trust him with my life if we were out in the wild. Like this is the guy that's going to make sure that we don't die. And when they tell me stories of like, this is a Bigfoot encounter that I had, or here's a sighting, and I haven't told anyone about it in 20 years because I knew that they were going to laugh at me, and I'm still holding on to it, and I'm still saying that I saw what I saw. Like, I do tend to give it way more credit now. So 10 years ago, I'd be like, Bigfoot's a fun idea, but it's kind of a Hollywood creation. To now, I've heard so many reports from people that I trust in all other matters that it would almost be a disservice to them and myself to just completely dismiss it outright. So I've got hope, but I also feel that if there is a true version of Bigfoot, he's either under lock and key of the Men in Black, or they're so smart, or they are so adapted to avoiding humans that it's just part of their survival method. So I don't know if I'll ever see one in person, but I'm definitely on the fence. Like I would give it like a straight up 50% chance of existing.
Yeah, like it wouldn't surprise you if they're like, oh yeah, Bigfoot's real. It's not a...
So the other thing too, and this is Bigfoot, ghosts, demons, magic, everything that you would put into this like paranormal field. I do have, and I'm a unapologetic capitalist in this way, but I truly believe that the market proves all things, and if Bigfoot were real, if ghosts were real, that somebody out there would figure out a way to make a ghost streaming channel or a Bigfoot streaming channel, and like, here is unequivocal proof that this thing exists. Join my Patreon, give me $50 and I'll give you more proof. Whenever that doesn't exist, whenever someone hasn't capitalized on some sort of a phenomenon and now says, give me $20 and I'll show you more, the absence of that to me is damning proof that something is unsubstantiated. Great. Is black magic true? Can you do a little spell? Can you stare into a flame and tell the future? Great. Live stream that, charge people $5 for entry and see if it keeps holding up. And again, this is where I get into like my normie, like pro state stuff. Like this is my shill speech. But there was a guy, James Randi, who ran the Paranormal Challenge or the Randi Challenge. And basically anyone that claimed that they were clairvoyant or they were telepathic or they could read your mind or bend a spoon or any of these things that were popular in the 70s and 80s, he'd be like, great, come to my compound. We've got scientists. Everything's under camera. We've got like, soundproof rooms and stuff. Come do your magic and your telepathy and your astral projection here so that we can observe it and make sure that it is objectively true and not just like, oh yeah, my friend was there, he saw it, just ask him, and the friend's like, yeah, it was totally real. Like that's usually the
right.
level of scrutiny that these kind of claims get. So in that way, in the most shilly way possible, unless someone's making a buck off of it, I don't know if I fully believe it.
Yeah. That's a great point. It's a fair point.
If you had a haunted house, why not charge admission? Hey, I got there's a chick that shows up here, and hotels do that, right? There's very popular hotels. It's like, oh, you can stay in the haunted room for an extra $200 a night. Right. Yeah. But how often do people like, okay, I'm going to live stream. There's the ghost. Okay. There would be people lined up to rent that room over and over, which it just doesn't happen. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the strongest counterpoint, but I believe in the market more than I believe in a ghost. So I want the market to prove whether or not a ghost exists.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough, man. That's true. I mean, I know this one hotel. Again, it's like one of those things. Are you really not wanting people to know that your property's haunted, or are you just trying to like, keep it on the down low and like add to the mystery, right? Because I know a place that's allegedly haunted who won't like stand on those laurels, right? And I don't know why they won't, but I know I would. I'd be like, yes, come on. here's the extra $50 to spend the night in this room.
Yeah, sign this
Or
waiver.
eat dinner in this spot because, George Washington's ghost stands next to this fire and drinks tea or whatever. Yeah, I got what you're saying. I would take advantage of it in a heartbeat, but, So, with the name of this podcast being Broadcasting Seeds, and we'll wrap it up after this. This is my last question, really, unless you've got other things to talk about. But one thing that you could leave folks, like plant the seed in their minds of something that might not be, that's like on your radar, that they might not really, that the audience might not know about, that you find really interesting, but, just kind of like a challenge for them to dig into it.
My go-to has pretty much always been MK Ultra, and it's such a massive term and a massive government project that sometimes I just assume everyone has gone as deep into the paint into MK Ultra as I have, but sometimes it's not the case. To me, I like bringing up MK Ultra the most because it's one of the only few documented government conspiracy theories. It talks about astral projection and ghosts and telekinesis and psychedelics and black magic and voodoo. It kind of does a little bit of everything. And I guess the premise that I appreciate the most is that the government is willing to spend money. If there's a 0.0001% chance that they can weaponize magic or they can weaponize drugs or weaponize anything, the MK Ultra program is proof that they will absolutely dedicate the resources to it. And just because the government spends $100 million on looking into ghosts doesn't mean that they've proven ghosts exist, but it does prove that they gave it enough credit to be like, hey, let's not write this off. If we can blow up a small village using this information, then by all means, let's look into this. So if you look into psychic driving, if you look into the use of LSD to plant memories, if you look into a lot of the connections, a lot of the names will keep popping up over and over again. One of the linchpins of psychedelics and MK Ultra and eugenics and a whole bunch of other host of topics comes from the Huxley family, Aldous Huxley, the same place where we get the theory of evolution. Thomas Huxley, who was Aldous Huxley's dad, was basically called Darwin's bulldog. He was the guy that they would send in to just debate people and just dress them down for not, towing the line essentially for this stuff. And when you see these names pop up over and over again in different contexts, again, psychedelics, telekinesis, black magic, I really feel that the fact that the government and the military gave it enough credit to look into, that maybe you should too. Maybe you should care just enough to look into it and see, maybe there is something to this. I guess the same thinking, if someone out there thinks that they can make a buck by telling you the hotel is haunted, maybe it is, but if they also spent money in doing telekinesis or spent money in seeing if they can program you into being an assassin and then wiping your own brain, either metaphorically or literally, that these things do exist. They've been around since forever, and it's not like they are learning new stuff and they're tracking. That the CIA and MK Ultra basically is them going through folklore. This is them cracking open Grimm's fairy tales and being like, what if this was true? What if this is real? Can we do this? So it's almost like the line is very blurred between folklore and mythology and actual fact. So I guess that the seed that I would plant is look into MK Ultra and its 160 plus different sub-projects. There are things way beyond just dosing people with LSD and telling them to kill RFK. They were putting together camps for children and getting children to come and just spend a summer together and then come back again years later and come back again years later. And a lot of them end up becoming CIA assets over time. There was Sidney Gottlieb, who was known as the dark sorcerer, the black magician, or the dirty trickster. He had all these different names. He's the one that usually gets associated with a lot of the LSD research. But he was also very big into studying Western African folklore and their versions of black magic and voodoo, they actually have documented CIA projects where they looked into how viable is this? Can we put a hex on someone? Is this a way that we can take out some of our political adversaries? It goes all the way into trying to take out Castro from putting thallium in his boots so that his beard would fall out, so that when he went on TV, people would... They assumed that the Cubans were all just in love with his machismo, and if his beard fell out, then he would be effeminate, and people would no longer want to follow him because now he looks like a chick, right, without beard hair. Weird stuff. One of the projects that gets cited a lot now in 2025 is this Project Bluebeam stuff, where they fake an alien invasion. This also can date back to MK Ultra, specifically with Cubans, although the original version of this was, let's just set off a bunch of fireworks and then convince people it's somehow related to the second coming of Christ. And if they believe that, then maybe they won't be these godless communists, and maybe that'll take him out. They had a CIA documented plan to blow the moon up. So just seeing the types of things that they would consider doing, to me, is like, fact is stranger than fiction in these cases. Even if you don't believe in ghosts, the fact that the CIA might have tried to train ghosts to take out political adversaries, that to me is beyond fascinating. So that's my biggest seed, is just look more into MK Ultra. It's so much deeper with so many more ties and names that you could ever cover in even an 80-hour podcast.
Yeah, it makes your head just spin. It is. It's unbelievable. That's a great a great seed to plant for sure.
And we paid for it. This is all taxpayer dollars.
Right.
So like we own it.
Right.
Like me and you own it as much as anyone else does.
Oh my gosh, it's just wild, some of the stuff. And it's, there's many rabbit holes with that. You'll twist ankles all over the place. So it's...
I'll plant one other one too. Maybe one that's a little bit less known. Something called PatCon, or short for Patriot Conspiracy. And this was apparently a program that started in the late 80s to early 90s. And it was the three-letter agencies, ATF, DEA, FBI, whoever else you want to throw in there, basically saying, let's throw some gas on the fire. If there are right-wing extremists, specifically militias, anyone that's big into the Second Amendment, big into anti-government, let's go ahead and just make them as extreme as we can. Let's infiltrate these groups. Let's provide them with guns and bombs and reading material, and let's just make them the most extreme version of them that we can, and then ride in guns a-blazing and arrest them all and show the world, look, we saved you from these horrible groups of people that had bombs and grenades and guns and stockpiles, and this is where you get Ruby Ridge and Waco and Oklahoma City and January 6th maybe, just kind of ramping up. But there is a very real paper trail. Just look up PatCon, PATCON. It's a doozy, man. It's a wild rabbit hole that seems to imply that the government is setting themselves up. They're sending in undercover agents that aren't coordinating across the different divisions. So an FBI guy is saying some extreme stuff in front of DEA guy, and neither of them realize they're both insiders, and they keep upping the ante on each other, and they're going back and like, we got to put an end to this. This militia's getting crazy, not realizing that they're literally talking about 4 FBI guys that are just egging you on. So yeah, that's another crazy seed that makes you wonder, like, how deep does it go? And if it goes as deep as some of the claims, have any of these domestic terrorism acts ever been truly organic? Have ever of them actually happened by just extremists on their own? Or would none of them have happened if it weren't for the FBI, ATF, DEA throwing gas on the fire?
Yeah, that's huge. I wouldn't doubt it by any stretch of imagination.
At this point, I would almost be disappointed in our three-letter agencies if they weren't doing this.
Right. At this point. Jeez. No shit. Well, Thomas, I have to thank you for coming on. We could talk all day, I feel like, about just this crazy stuff.
Like I said, you could throw a dart at a wall and we could just go for hours.
Yeah. I mean, I have a bookshelf that I could be like, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about this?
I love it, man. This has been like my fascinating. I wish that cared as much about conspiracy and occult research as any other subject that ever came up in school. I would have been valedictorian at every school I ever went to, but instead I was like reading comics and ignoring whatever they were talking. They were talking about tally sticks and fractional reserve. If they just told me about money masters and the Rothschilds, I might have paid more attention at that point.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Right. It taught us 10% of what is out there, right? They'd have kids like, wait, what just happened? Yeah, I agree. So tell us where we can find you. Shameless product placement.
The best place is at paranoidamerican.com. I've got links to all my other podcasts and projects. It's the one place that hopefully can't be taken away from me. Sometimes I make the mistake, go to my YouTube channel, go follow Paranoid American on YouTube. Oh, and it's down this week because someone said something naughty in a 4-hour interview. Someone said something in the span of 3 seconds, and now my channel's gone. But yeah, look and find me in all those different places. Luckily, audio podcasts are not as censored or regulated. So if you just go on Spotify and Apple or all the places where you do audio podcasts and just search for Paranoid American, I'll pop right up. And most of the things that maybe even aren't allowed on other social networks are typically on there in audio form. So you can hear me rant and hear other people rant, and sometimes we debate and get into arguments and disagree. Sometimes everyone's saying the same thing, but this is the kind of information that I live for. I love it.
Yeah, agreed. Well, again, thanks for coming on, and hopefully we'll do it again down the road.
Anytime, man. I would love to. Thank you so much.
I got bad thoughts that make my mind scared. Hold me hostage and they don't fight fair. Who gon' pray for me and wipe on my tears? Who gon' save me if you not right here? Move this darkness and make my sight clear. Take me your way cause I don't like here. Ghosts of my past, they feeling the night air. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. The deep end apparitions of all my demons. All my thoughts are committing treason. All alone, who gon' hear me screaming? Manifestations of my fears. Regrets that stretched out for light years. Can almost touch the light, homie, it's right there. Body free but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All the lights are